So let's get to the 9 criterias in the DSM-5 for borderline personality disorder. Now, borderline personality disorder is a cluster B disorder, and there are 9 criterias, but someone has to fit 5 in order to get the diagnosis. Also, some of the criterias have a lot of and or in them, so they could fit either one, or for example, with the 4th criteria, there's a list to at least 2 of within the list they have to fit in order to fit that criteria. So basically, there are over 250 different types of borderline personality disorders. Now let's get to the first criteria, having a fear of abandonment or having this imagined abandonment that causes them to get abandoned eventually. So the fear of abandonment aspect of it really does show how people with borderline personality disorder, most people with borderline personality disorder, have an anxious attachment style because of that trauma that they have, the abandonment trauma. So, because they have this abandonment trauma, they try to not get abandoned, which leads them to getting abandoned. And also, them imagining the abandonment situation also sabotages their relationship because after they imagine that they're being abandoned, they can't tell what the actuality is. So they act like they've been broken up, even though they hadn't been, which ends the relationship altogether in the end. So that's also a part of the first criteria. Also, we have to keep in mind that to fit a specific criteria, a person has to consistently display this type of behavior. So just because they experience a one-time thing, that doesn't mean that they actually fit in the first criteria. They have to constantly do this for a while for a psychologist to actually say that they fit the first criteria. Now let's get to criteria number 2, unstable relationships. So if a person has multiple partners within a week, like 8 partners per week, and they keep on, living this type of lifestyle, they fit in the second criteria. Now, due to fitting the first criteria, they might end up fitting into the second criteria as well, because the first criteria is having a fear of abandonment. These people can't be alone that often, so they end up with new partners every time. So criteria 1 can sometimes lead to criteria 2. And some might say not having a stable relationship is like not a bad thing, but it actually is because it negatively impacts the person who fits the criteria and it negatively impacts other people too. Like you're interacting with people and having an effect on them. So criteria 2 is not good for them and it's not good for the people who become their partners and then the other people who also become their partners and then the other people who become their partners. It's basically bad for a whole lot of people. And a bunch of other criterias can also lead them to fitting criteria number 2. So basically, if they fit some of the criterias, they end up fitting other criterias after a while. So it's better for an individual to go and get therapy while they fit the first few criterias before those criterias lead to them fitting other criterias, which has them, getting a diagnosis. It's better to not get a diagnosis and to do something from beforehand. Criteria number 3, identity disturbance, or them not having a sense of self or not having a stable self-image. So with this criteria, they might have a hard time with introducing themselves. Also, they might change their image quite often. Like on Monday, they're dressed kind of like too feminine. On Tuesday, they look more gothic. And then on Wednesday, they look like, I don't know, like they keep on changing their image. They keep on introducing themselves differently. They're trying to so-called get to know themselves. Which, by the way, if you know how like young people go through like phases, like really for someone to fit criteria number 3, they really have to have a hard time with their image like altogether, especially when they're a lot older. Like if they're over the age of 25 and they're still behaving like this, then that might make them fit criteria 3. But if they're like 14, 15 and they're playing around, then that's not so much a fit in criteria number 3. But if they keep doing it until they're in their 30s and 40s, then yeah, then they would fit criteria number 3. Criteria number 4, impulsivity in at least 2 of the following: spending money, sexual relations, substance abuse, reckless driving, and binge eating. Yes, I read it off. So criteria number 4 is pretty self-explanatory. They have to fit at least 2 of the following that I just mentioned. If they fit 1, they don't fit the criteria. They fit like half a criteria, which means they don't fit it. So you have to remember that they have to do this in a more impulsive way. Like, for example, spending money, right? So let's say they spent too much for this one time for whatever reason. They do not fit the criteria, or half the criteria. They have to like spend a lot for a bunch of times to fit criteria number 4, or to fit that portion of criteria number 4. So it's like you take someone's credit card, or like your own credit card, but I'm thinking of like teenagers and young adults. So they take a relative's credit card and then they like spend a lot of money at the mall, and then they end up with, or their relative ends up with like a lot of credit card debt because they spent it. And but that's just like a one-time thing. Like, picture them doing this quite a lot in a very impulsive way. And also they have to do something else impulsively, like, let's say, I don't know, reckless driving. So they're like doing both of those things in a more impulsive way for quite a few times, then guaranteed they fit criteria number 4. That was just an example. There's other combinations. Criteria number 5 is them displaying recurrent suicidal behavior, gestures, threats, and also self-mutilating behavior. And also criteria number 5 is separate from criterias 1 and 4. So what does criteria number 5 have anything to do with 1 and 4? Here's the thing. So for example, with suicidal threats, like, I'll kill myself if you leave, that fits. It doesn't fit actually into criteria 1, but it sounds similar to criteria 1, because with criteria 1, as I said, they have this fear of abandonment, so they're trying to make the person not leave, and so they display these behaviors that eventually makes the person leave. So in order for them to actually stay, they pretend like they're committing suicide even though they're not. Some people actually do commit suicide while having borderline personality disorder, but in this example, they tell the partner that they'll do it just so that the partner comes back. But after a while, the partner isn't going to take the person seriously as they keep on displaying this behavior, and so they eventually do get abandoned. Again, the abandonment trauma is separate from the suicidal threat criteria. Also, how is criteria 5 similar to criteria 4? So when I mentioned criteria number 4 as an example, I said, the money spending habit and reckless driving. So the reckless driving aspect is within criteria number 4, but if they're doing it to commit suicide, that belongs in criteria number 5. So again, these are very separate. Consistently recklessly driving, and some of their reckless driving sessions are actually suicidal sessions. They're fitting 2 criteria at the same time in that moment, but they're separate. So they do fit criteria number 5 as well if their intention was to kill themselves, or pretend like they're killing themselves to get attention, or whatever the case may be. Those are separate criteria. Criteria number 6, emotional instability. So a lot of people confuse this criteria with bipolar disorder. Now, borderline personality disorder and bipolar disorder are both considered mood disorders, but they're very different, because with bipolar disorder, people have like manic and depressive episodes that could take like a long while. With borderline personality disorder, it's more so like within a moment they could shift from being very happy to very angry to very sad. So with borderline personality disorder, they could display these emotions, extreme emotions, by the way, within a short amount of time. With bipolar disorder, they could have like 3 months long periods of manic episodes and then 3 months long periods of depressive episodes. So they're very different when it comes to the timing of their episodes. But yeah, with borderline personality disorder, criteria 6 can also look like, let's say you and your friends are watching a comedy movie and you are all laughing at the comedy. And then your friend with borderline personality disorder just feels very angry for some reason. Like their moods actually don't match the social interaction in that moment. You guys are watching a comedy movie, but your friend is very angry. Or let's say you guys are talking about something that's very traumatic. So you're all very anxious, upset, and your friend with borderline personality disorder is laughing at the situation and they're very extremely happy. Again, their emotions do not match the environments in that moment. Criteria number 7, chronic feelings of emptiness. Okay, so this one was a little hard for me to understand because I have never felt this before, and I hope I never feel this because that is very abnormal. So, what is this feeling of emptiness? So, basically, they have this feeling of like as if their internal organs don't exist. Like, as if there's like a vessel sitting in their diaphragm and like their internal organs are somewhat not there. Like there's a hole or a vase or a cup. One of my friends said it feels like a cup in their like inside their chest. So chronic feelings of emptiness apparently feel like that. Like I said, I've never felt that, and I hope I never do because that is not normal. That you have organs. You do have organs. Criteria 8, inappropriate and intense anger, like they can't control their anger, they might get into a lot of fights. But like I said in the beginning of the video, like a one-time thing does not mean that they fit the criteria. So if they ended up being in a fight one time, they don't fit criteria number 8. Criteria 8 is like having this intense anger and they can't control themselves. So uncontrollable anger is what criteria 8 really is. But you can see them like getting into a lot of fist fights and street fights. That can happen with people fitting the 8th criteria. And the last criteria number 9, either them being very paranoid or dissociation. So with them being paranoid, this is sort of related to criteria number 1, like the imagined abandonment. Like they're not actually getting abandoned, but they think they're getting abandoned. Like let's say they call someone and they don't pick up. Like, are they leaving me? Like those thoughts are them being paranoid. Also, not just like abandonment issues related, but they could be paranoid about a lot of things. Like they could think that you said something even though you didn't, and that might cause them to have uncontrollable anger afterwards. So in that moment, they're fitting criteria 9 and criteria 8 at the same time. If they think you said something and you're like, what? And they're like, they start fighting. Oh my God. It's actually not funny. I don't know why I'm laughing. But that's the whole being paranoid aspect of it. And then the dissociation. So with borderline personality disorder, another abnormal bodily behavior is when they dissociate, sometimes they feel like as if their soul is being taken out of their body and they can't feel like their arms and legs. Like they don't know where their hands end and where their feet end because they feel like they've risen above over their body and they're watching themselves from there. which is also abnormal behavior. But why does that happen? It's because with most people who have this disorder, in their lives, they don't have a lot of control. So, because they don't have a lot of control in their lives, with this type of dissociation, like it's them feeling like as if they can't control the situation at all, so that they are just watching a character from above, like as if they're watching a movie or a video game. Like they don't feel like they're a part of their reality because they have no control over situations. So that is another thing that could happen. This is the type of dissociation that happens typically with people who have borderline personality disorder. But I think they could dissociate in any type of way and they could still fit this criteria. Like some people have more dissociative disorders. And by the way, with borderline personality disorder, BPD is very comorbid with a lot of other disorders. For example, with binge eating, they already fit half of criteria 4. So, really, other disorders can, if they're not managed, people can eventually have, that disorder plus BPD. So, yeah, it can get really hard. But with the help of therapy, the symptoms of the other disorders can be managed. And with borderline personality disorder, you have to keep in mind that someone could fit all 9 criterias and have the disorder, and then a year later, they could fit none of the criterias and not have the disorder at all. So, yes, remission is very much possible with BPD. All right, so those were the 9 criterias in the DSM-5 for borderline personality disorder. Thank you for watching, and if you want to see more videos like this, please subscribe and like the video. Thank you so much.